Fargo, the new virtual assistant from Wells Fargo, makes banking faster and easier. Like this.
Fargo, what's my checking account routing number?
And this.
Fargo, turn off my debit card.
And this.
Fargo, what did I spend on groceries last month?
And that's just the beginning. Do you, Fargo? You can. In the Wells Fargo mobile app. Learn more at wellsfargo.com/getfargo.
Terms and conditions apply. Your mobile carrier's availability and message and data rates may apply. Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.
Hello there, writers and book lovers. If you enjoy listening to the show and want to help me keep creating awesome content, I have a Patreon page where you can support the podcast and get exclusive access to ad-free episodes, live chats, and the Discord server. By becoming a patron, you'll be helping me cover the costs of producing the show and making it even better. So if you can, please head over to the Patreon page and join the community of Right and Wrong fans who are helping to take the show to the next level. Thank you for listening and for your support. Let's get back to it.
So our podcast is called Right and Wrong.
Are these your notes?
These
are your notes about what we're going to say?
Anything.
Nailed it.
It's the short answer.
So how many novels did you not finish?
Oh my God, so many.
It was perfect. What's she talking about? This is nonsense.
Ooh, a spicy question. I love it.
This is it, guys. The big secret to getting published is you have to write a good book. You heard it here first. Hello, and welcome back to the Right and Wrong podcast. I am joined today all the way from New Zealand by #1 Kindle best-selling historical and contemporary women's fiction author, Soraya Lane. Hi, Soraya. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming on. This is, I mentioned before we started recording, this is the longest distance interview that I have ever done. So it's quite exciting for me. You have, straight into it, you have a new novel, which will be out by the time this airs, The Cuban Daughter, which is the second part of your Lost Daughters series. Tell us a bit about it.
Yes, so very exciting with the second book in the series coming out very soon. So just to give you a quick overview, I suppose, the Lost Daughters series centers around, the stories are all linked by a connection to Hope's house. So each main character in the present day receives a small wooden box that contains a clue to the main characters, to her grandmother's past, that was left behind at a home for unmarried mothers and babies. So I have each woman, the books span between present day and the past, and each woman goes on a journey to discover her secret heritage. So we have all the books start in London, including the new book, The Cuban Daughter. But as the title would suggest, we travel to Cuba with our main character, Claudia, and she goes to Cuba to try and find out about this secret heritage of hers. And we also have the second story, which is set in the past, which is around Esmeralda, who turns out may or may not turn out to be Claudia's long lost grandmother.
Yeah. Well, that's great. It's a really cool. I love these sort of. It's not quite an anthology series, but a series where it's sort of lots of individual stories connected by one sort of central hook. I love that kind of thing.
Absolutely, and I really wanted people to be able to, pick up book, 2 or 3 or 4 in the series and not feel that they had missed something from not reading the first book. So obviously it's nice to start from book 1, but there's an overarching theme that links each book, but you certainly don't miss out on on something, an important key plot point or something if you do just dive into book 2 or another book in the series.
Yes, and you can almost read these in any order.
Yes, absolutely, definitely. And in The Cuban Daughter, we actually have a scene that is also in the first book, which is repeated at the start of the book. Just for those readers who haven't, started at the very beginning with book 1. But I'm actually hard at work on finishing book 3 at the moment, so I haven't repeated that scene in book 3. But it was just nice to be able to do that for readers who might be jumping straight in book 2.
Yeah. Okay. So you get 2 chances, but book 3.
Yes.
No prisoners.
Exactly.
So with this one releasing, how many books will you have out in the world then?
Oh, in the world? That's a very good question. Do you know, I feel like I stopped counting at some point. I have been writing for a number of years now. I'm a full-time novelist. So I think I'm up to maybe about book number 42, but I know it's over 40, but I would have to check. Yeah.
And that's published, right?
Yes, so some of the earlier books were shorter, slightly shorter formats. But no, it's been. I also just because I like to mix things up a little. I also wrote a children's series in there as well. So I had a 6-book children's series that came out along the way as well. So I'm counting that with that tally up of books.
Okay. Was it very different? Did you find it very different going from sort of contemporary and historical fiction to children's books?
Yes, it was. It was so difficult. I had this wonderful idea in mind, the type of series that I wanted to read when I was a child. But actually, getting into the head of a 12-year-old girl is rather difficult. So I found it so hard because I feel like with the contemporary and even the historical books that I usually write for an adult audience, the characters are probably more a similar age to me, and I feel like it's easier to understand, what they're going through and how they might be feeling or reacting in certain situations. So I definitely think writing children's fiction is much, much harder.
Yeah. And from my experience as well, there's a lot more for the industry. There's a lot more sort of gatekeeping in terms of like, there's a lot of safety protocols and sort of things you have to think about on more levels with children's stuff, as opposed to adult, where you can kind of be much more broad and do maybe more risque things.
Absolutely. I think there's sort of a responsibility factor perhaps of writing children's fiction,
Exactly.
whereas adult fiction is quite different.
Yeah. If I want to write something insane and you want to buy it, then you're an adult and you made that choice.
Exactly.
So going back a bit here, you've written many novels now.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember when you wrote your very first one?
First published one or first ever novel?
Well, let's start with first ever novel.
First ever. Okay, I remember it very clearly. I was actually at university studying law, and I had this overwhelming feeling of wondering why on earth I wanted to be a lawyer. And it just, I did enjoy the degree, but I just had this feeling it wasn't the right career for me. And so it took me 2 years whilst I was studying to write this very long-winded historical romance novel. And I thought it was the most amazing thing ever written, and sent it off to, agents and editors, and was promptly rejected by everybody. So it took me about another 6 unpublished novels before I finally had the phone call offering to buy my first book. So it was a very, I call it my apprenticeship. It certainly took a little while.
That's such a good way of looking at it. Like, yeah, you have to apprentice.
Absolutely.
You have to apprentice sort of by yourself with no, no like team or anything around you. That's, yeah. I mean, I think a very relatable story for a lot of authors is you kind of have to. There's often a lot of struggle and time and kind of shouting into the void goes on before it can all take off.
Absolutely. And I do genuinely think, you can go to all the writing courses and read all the right books about how to do things, but sometimes it's actually just the writing that really, I think, helps us develop our voice and to really get a feel for what we want to write and where our strengths lie. So although by book number 7, I was definitely ready to be published, it was worth it. It was definitely worth it.
Okay. So 6 novels that you'd written, and were you sort of, every time you wrote a new one, were you submitting it to agents? Were you submitting to publishers?
I was, and living in New Zealand, it was back then we actually had to post off the partial, so the first 3 chapters, and so I can tell you it cost a small fortune to send those partial manuscripts to London and to New York. At the time, I was sending them everywhere I could, and of course you had to pay for a self-addressed envelope too to send them back in. So it was a very expensive exercise. But no, it was. I tried very hard to get those books published, and I was actively, looking for a publisher and for an agent. And when it finally all came together, I actually received my first offer from a publisher and an offer from an agent all in the same week. So it's amazing how you can try something for so long and it all comes together at the same time.
Yeah. So that was book number 7.
It was, yes. Although I restarted my counter and just pretended that those other novels didn't exist at that point.
That was just the warm up.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, and that was Laura Bradford.
Laura Bradford, yes, and we're still together. I think I've been with her for, I think it's 13 years now. So it's been great.
Okay, so what's interesting. So you must have gone to a publisher direct as well as her, and then they
Yes.
both offered at the same time. Did you end up taking that deal?
Yes, I actually entered a writing contest, and I
Okay.
placed first in it. And the editor said to me, "Send me the rest of the book." So it was it was after so long of submitting, and trying to get sort of, I guess, past the gatekeeper to get an editor to read my material. It kind of all just fell into place by entering a contest through a local writing organization, and I actually met my agent at a conference. So it's sort of just it all just fell into place.
Okay.
Yeah,
So it was sort of you putting yourself out there and just continually
absolutely.
expressing that you wanted to be part of this industry. You wanted to sign up with
Yes,
people. That's great.
for sure.
So did you sign that book deal independent of your agent, or was your agent involved in that deal?
No, she jumped in very, very quickly, and she took over that deal. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it was I was very lucky. I was very lucky it all just worked out.
Okay, amazing. So
Yeah.
I know that you are publishing your latest book, Cuban Daughter, and that Lost Daughters series. Am I right in thinking that you're publishing with Bookouture?
That's correct. Yes, I am.
And is the other publisher the same publisher that you've been with since book 7/1?
No, actually, I've moved around a little bit over the years. I always find it so hard to move publisher because it's that close relationship you develop with an editor. So I have had a couple of changes, but since 2014 or maybe 2013, I've been writing historical fiction for Amazon Publishing. I work with their UK office. And so I have a book come out every year with Amazon Publishing, and which they are World War II historical fiction novels. And now I've got this exciting new series with Bookouture. So it's been wonderful working with two really strong publishers. And I'm the sort of author that writes a lot. I'm very prolific, and I just love being busy and creating all the time. So it sort of works for me having the two publishers, so I can, I suppose, put out more books each year.
So are you doing one book for each publisher every year?
I'm actually doing 2 books for Bookouture a year and 1 for Amazon at the moment. But
wow.
I need to backtrack a little bit and just say that during COVID here in New Zealand, we had very strict lockdowns. So I spent a lot of time at home. We could not leave. The only time you were allowed to leave the house was to go to the doctor or go to the supermarket. And so we had weeks and weeks and weeks on end. We had 2 separate, very strict lockdowns. So I did what any good author would do and spend a lot of time writing. So I did I caught up a lot on my schedule. So I was very ahead of myself. So I'm not actually writing the 3 books. I did have a lot of material already written during that time. So it's not quite as punishing as it sounds.
Okay. So you had a sort of a backlog. And
I had a backlog.
Yeah.
Yes.
And presumably, Laura, your agent, sort of presented that as, we have some books ready to just kind of be edited and go through.
Absolutely. And I always was with Amazon Publishing, I was always finding that I was always saying, can't we, can I deliver this earlier, or can we publish this earlier? Because I was always, always ahead of schedule. So the exciting thing was that during COVID, I went through that whole period of, I suppose, like everyone did, feeling very glum about being, stuck at home. And then I just came up with this magical new series that sort of really captured my imagination. So if one thing came out of COVID for me that was positive, it was certainly developing the Lost Daughters series.
Yeah. I mean, it was a great opportunity for people to just sort of be alone with their thoughts, I think. And a lot of people did. There was a sort of boom of people coming up with new books and stories and things like that. I guess just time as well. It gave people time to finally write stuff that they'd wanted to write but didn't have the time to do, I guess.
Yes, and I think also just having that, I mean, we're very fortunate here. We have a lot of space where we live, and although I was home with children who I had to help with their schoolwork, which was my least favourite part of COVID, it was wonderful to actually just have that time. I think more thinking time. There was no sort of dashing to school pickup and all the after-school activities that I normally have to ferry my kids to and from. And it just, I think, gave me a lot more thinking time. And it also made me realize that there were so many places I wanted to travel to and so many things I wanted to do. And the world suddenly felt so, shut off. Our international borders here in New Zealand were closed for, I'm not sure exactly how long. I think it was 2.5 years. It was definitely 2 years. And so that's, I suppose, how the series was born too, because I just, it was me dreaming of all the places I wanted to travel once we could travel again.
Yes. Yeah. It's funny that everyone was happy to sort of be like, oh, I'll go travel at some point, whenever. And then as soon as that gets taken away from you, you're like, no, I want to go now.
Absolutely. And it's just suddenly knowing you can't do something, obviously, it always makes you want it just that little bit more.
Yes, exactly.
Hello, Saver. Whether you're saving for that trip to the tropics or saving for an emergency, now is the time to take advantage of Wells Fargo's savings options. Wells Fargo offers savings accounts that can help you save towards your goals. So, what are you saving for? Visit a Wells Fargo branch or wellsfargo.com/save to open a savings account today.
Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.
Exactly. So, Bookouture, digital first publisher, is that kind of like, I'm not really familiar with what it's like working directly with Amazon as like a publisher versus just sort of self-publishing your stuff. What's the big difference there?
Look, to be perfectly honest, it's just like working with any other big publisher. So, it's Amazon have been incredible. I've had a wonderful home there for so many years now. I actually met my editor from Bookouture when she was working for Amazon in the London office. So that was how I, to be honest, that was probably the only reason I even branched out. I felt that I already knew her and trusted her as an editor. So it was sort of an easy pivot for me, I suppose, to offer her the new series. But no, Amazon are very much like other publishers I've worked with, just very much like a traditional publishing model, and they are digital first as well. Although in saying that, there is always a paperback edition that comes out with the book. But as far as I'm aware, I don't have the wide distribution through actual physical bookstores. But no, it's very similar. Both Bookouture and Amazon are very similar publishers to work with in terms of their author focus and I suppose just the type of publishing model and their great marketing skills. Yeah.
Yes, that's I hear a lot about Bookouture and the great success that they're having with marketing and sort of doing things slightly differently to the kind of big, older, established traditional publishers.
Yes, absolutely. And I think they really do, they know what they're doing with their digital marketing. I suppose I'm quite fortunate because having, been published by Amazon, who they have an incredible way of marketing with, just with Amazon and who they can market directly to. So I've been very fortunate. So I have been published by very traditional publishers who have just been, paperback and not had that digital focus. But I think, so many of my readers are digital. I have a growing group of audio listeners as well. So I think that's a really big market. So it's just exciting to be with two great publishers, to be honest.
Yeah. And so how do you say you've been with like a more traditional publisher? Does it feel kind of very different the way that Bookouture and Amazon, the kind of digital first guys, the way that they operate? Is it very different?
Yes, I think it is. I think one of the biggest things is that, from when you hand the book in and the book is edited, it's published so much faster. So I feel like you haven't got that really long lag that sometimes exists in traditional publishing, where it might be a year or 18 months or even longer before the book actually hits the shelves. But I think also they're very author focused. They're very much wanting you to feel part of the process and that your voice is heard. Whereas I feel in the past with traditional print publishers, it's you perhaps don't get such a say over things like cover art or just I do feel that they're both far more author centric than maybe some other publishers.
Yeah, because I guess there's an amount of, when it comes to the timeline, there's a lot more sort of flexibility because you're not having to sort of create do a whole print run where these things need to be planned and like set up and manufactured many months in advance, because you can't, like digital first, you can change the cover within like a few weeks of the book actually coming out in many cases.
Yes, definitely. And I do think that's something that some of these digital first publishers are, really focused on is that if something isn't selling, or there's, you're not seeing the sales perhaps that you expected, they will often be prepared to change the cover or to change the blurb or to make those tweaks to make sure the book performs. Whereas I feel like, that flexibility just simply can't exist necessarily in the very traditional publishing model.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
But then there's obviously the converse thing, which I think is more of just a sort of sentimental thing than anything, where you can't a lot of the time go to your local bookshop and find your book on the shelf at the bookshop.
Yes, and I have to say this has actually been one of the most exciting things about this series. So obviously I signed with Bookouture as a digital first publisher. I knew that their parent company, Hachette Publishing, I knew that that there was a chance they could pick the book up for print, and there was obviously the hope that there were going to be some foreign publishers there too, and they did pick up the paperback. So I have the paperback coming out. So The Italian Daughter, the first book in the series, that'll be in UK bookstores in June, and also the first book, The Italian Daughter, came out here in New Zealand just last month. So it has been exciting. Amazing. It's been just so wonderful. After so many years of never seeing my book on a shelf, I've been, going to every single bookstore to actually just to see it with my own eyes. So it has been lovely, and it is also coming out in paperback in the US and through Grand Central Publishing in December. So it's been really exciting actually having those print deals come through and having the best of both worlds. So I do feel very lucky.
Oh, amazing. That really is the best of both worlds.
It is. Yes. Yeah.
Wow. And so let's go back to you've been writing and publishing for quite some time now, and you've got many books out there. I had a quick scroll through on your website just to see all the covers, and it's really interesting seeing the because you write in series, so the covers are usually set to match per the kind of block of the series, and it's really interesting to see how those have kind of evolved and kind of grown. Do you feel like as a writer that your style has changed, has grown since your first book?
Oh, it's grown hugely, and I think, in the beginning, I was, obviously, like many authors, I was just so focused on being published. And I think also probably in a way writing to market in terms of thinking, I want this to be my career, and I want to write, the books that are going to sell. And I feel that I now am at a position in my career where I'm so fortunate that I'm actually writing the books of my heart. I'm writing the books I truly, want to write, the books that I would love to read as a reader. And so I do feel very fortunate that I've been able to sort of, make that pivot, and that I can write just truly the books of my heart. So whether it's the World War II fiction or this exciting new series that I've been working on, I think it's a really special thing to actually know that you've pitched books that you're not just writing because you need to pay the rent or the mortgage, that they're actually that's good too, but that I feel like I can, and my editors trust me and trust my judgment, and I really trust them as well, and I'm at a point where I'm just so happy with the content that I'm able to create.
Yes, I think writing for market's always a dangerous approach to take when it comes to trying to get your work published.
Yes, absolutely. And, I have taken a lot of my older books down from my website too, because I don't, I still love all those stories. They're always special to me, but I feel like I've finally found just my voice and the types of stories that I really want to write. So yeah, it's a wonderful feeling.
Well, that's great. And it's great that I'm sure that kind of confidence comes through in the writing now as well, now that you feel sort of very secure in what you're writing and how you're writing it.
Yes, I hope so. And I think too, when you've worked with the same editors for so long, my editors at Amazon Publishing, I've been so fortunate to have a wonderful team there. We always actually, I was emailing my editor at Amazon just before, and we had a hashtag dream team because we always call ourselves the dream team. There's two editors and myself, and it's just, I think, I've come to a point where I think if you choose the right people to work with and you really trust your team, if they tell me something's not working and that I should, sit down and rewrite 50 pages, then I know that I can trust them and that they have my best interests and they really understand my voice and the story I'm trying to convey. So I think it's really wonderful to be in that position where you really can trust the people that you're working with.
Yeah, building a relationship, like a strong relationship like that, is going to be so invaluable just for a career in publishing or in any industry, I imagine.
Yes, absolutely. And I think too, once you develop that relationship and that trust, it just makes it so much easier going forward, and it also makes it very hard if an editor leaves. It's change is always awful, but losing an editor is, I think, it's just the worst thing in the world. And because it takes so many books to actually really trust someone. And if someone new said to me, oh, delete those 25 pages or that chapter and start again, I'd be thinking, oh, I'm not so sure about that. Whereas, the editors I have at Bookasure and at Amazon, if either of them said that to me, then I would just think, okay, they know what they're doing, they know my writing, and I just trust the process.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's just that kind of like, we've been doing this for a long time.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Speaking of doing this for a long time, as someone who's sort of been through it, had the ups and downs, for aspiring writers who are listening to this and maybe interested in publishing their work and getting it out into the world, what advice would you give to people looking to sort of take their writing from something that they've written down and they have kind of saved on their computer to submitting it and getting it published?
Look, I think the biggest thing is that if you have actually written a whole novel, an entire novel, you're so much closer to being published than anybody else, because I think so many people will say to me or to other authors I know that they want to write and they want to be authors too. And then you'll ask them what they're writing and they'll say that they're not writing anything. And I think, well, if you're really serious about this and you're committed to actually, putting the effort in and writing the words, there is no reason why, your dream isn't going to come true of publication. The one thing I would say is that when I was starting out, self-publishing wasn't an option. It just simply didn't exist in the same way that it does now. And there was also quite a stigma about, the kinds of books when it did start taking off, self-published books versus traditional publishing. Then it was sort of quite a hard decision. And I feel fortunate that I wasn't able to just, write the book that took me 2 years that I thought was a masterpiece. I am so grateful that I did not have the option of just hitting publish and putting that out there, because I do think it's so accessible now, which is a fantastic thing. But I really think, you need to be confident that it is the best work and that it is the work you want to put out there. And so I would suggest that if you have written your first novel, start the next one, put that first one aside, and put some space between just take the time to actually put it aside, and then go back and read it in a month or 2 months or 3 months, and perhaps print it out and read it on paper, and just make sure that you are really happy with the content before you choose to self-publish. I think there are still great opportunities out there for traditional publishing deals. Also for younger writers who are, on TikTok, it's a whole new world that I certainly am not part of the TikTok I've seen. I think I'm too old for that now. But I do think there are so many opportunities out there, and, just be brave and, don't be scared of hearing no. There could be 100 rejections before, you get that one phone call or one email from an agent or an editor saying that they want to work with you. So I think writing is such a subjective industry to be in publishing. And, one editor might read your work and not like it, or it might just not be what they're looking for that day. They might already have, if you're writing contemporary romance, their list of contemporary romance authors might be full. And then you come across an editor somewhere else who, loves what you've created. So I just think you need to have the tenacity to keep writing and not be scared of rejection. And also look in the back of books you're reading. Often authors will credit their agent or the editor, and just start to see, what agents might be working with the types of authors that are similar to what you're writing. And just sort of, I suppose, really, for me, I treated it like a business. And I looked at, what agents were representing what authors, and what publishers were picking up new authors. So I think you really just need to put the research in and also spend the time just doing the words, writing the words.
A lot of great advice there, and very good to remember that, as you say, it's very subjective, and lots of people will have different thoughts on your manuscript, and especially you yourself. So definitely giving yourself some distance from a manuscript to really kind of take time to think about it, or get some of your friends or like other writing friends to read it, to just make sure that it's maybe not as amazing as you thought it was, or conversely not as terrible as you thought it was. That's often the case as well, because I think
absolutely
we all have imposter syndrome from time to time, especially in writing.
Of course. And I think too, that's another reason. It's, in the same way that you don't want to just give the manuscript to your mother and who's going to perhaps tell you that it's the best thing she's ever read. I think you also have to be careful and be careful of who you let read the novel, because you don't want someone to read it who isn't going to be supportive or who isn't the right target audience, to read it and might give you feedback that could be entirely unhelpful, but, really could crush your, your confidence. So, if you can join a local writing group or find, a tribe of other pre-published authors on a Facebook group or somewhere on social media, that can be a great way to actually have a critique partner and be reading another, author's work, another writer, and be able to work together, or a small group where you can, look at each other's work.
Yes, the writing community is everywhere, and
Yes.
from my experience, very welcoming and friendly.
Absolutely, yeah.
Amazing. That's a lot of really great advice there. Thank you so much for sharing that. And that brings us to the what is always the final question of the podcast, which is, Soraya, if you were stranded on a desert island with a single book, which book would you take with you?
Do you know, I find this question so difficult because I have to confess, I never reread books. Even a book that I absolutely love, I've never reread a book before. So I'm going to pick probably one of my favorite books. In fact, 100% my favorite book of last year, which was The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, because I found that to be such a different, unique, just a really clever story. And I thought, actually, if I was ever going to reread something, it would probably be that book. But I have to say, if I was on a desert island stranded, I would read any book, because I would be, I love reading, and I'd give anything a go. But I think that's the one I would take with me.
Oh, okay. No, that's a good one. I mean, I'm the same. I very rarely reread a book. What I'll sometimes do is I'll remember something, flick open an old book that I loved and reread like a certain passage or a chapter or something.
Yes, and I think the hard thing is there are some books that I just, in my mind, are just the best books I've ever read from many years ago, and I'm almost too scared to reread them in case they don't live up to my expectations of what I remembered them to be like.
Yeah. Reading, it's always a risk reading childhood favorites, because you never know if they're going to be as good as you kind of made them to be in your mind.
Exactly, yes.
Well, amazing. Thank you so much, Soraya, for coming on the podcast and sharing all of your experiences and telling us what you're up to and about your new book. It's been really, really great chatting with you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
And for anyone listening, if you want to keep up with what Soraya is doing, you can follow her on Twitter at Soraya_Lane, or on Instagram and Facebook at Soraya Lane Author. The Cuban Daughter is out on March 23rd, which I think is already happened by the time this airs. And to make sure you don't miss an episode of this podcast, follow along on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. To help support the show, head over to the Patreon page. And if you like discussing story tropes, check out my other podcast, The Chosen Ones, and Other Tropes. Thanks again to Soraya, and thanks to everyone for listening. We'll catch you in the next episode.
Fargo, the new virtual assistant from Wells Fargo, makes banking faster and easier. Like this.
Fargo, what's my checking account routing number?
And this.
Fargo, turn off my debit card.
And this.
Fargo, what did I spend on groceries last month?
And that's just the beginning. Do you, Fargo? You can. In the Wells Fargo mobile app. Learn more at wellsfargo.com/getfargo.
Terms and conditions apply. Your mobile carrier's availability and message and data rates may apply. Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.